In the song Petals, written by Mariah for her 1999 Rainbow album, lyrics include, "I often wondered if there's ever been a perfect family. I've always longed for undividedness and sought stability. A flower taught me how to pray, but as I grew, that flower changed. She started flailing in the wind, like golden petals scattering." Mariah is the youngest of 3 siblings. She was born March 27th, 1970, in Long Island, New York. Her brother's name is Morgan, he is the eldest, and her sister is Alison. Her father, Alfred Roy Carey, was of African American and Afro-Venezuelan descent. Mariah's grandfather changed his family name from Nanez to Carey to sound more European. Many immigrants did this back then to protect themselves from racism. Her mother, Patricia, who is of Irish-American descent, is a Juilliard-educated opera singer who worked as a voice coach. Mariah's parents met in 1960 and fell in love. Patricia's parents forbade her from seeing Alfred and were absolutely against the interracial relationship, but they eventually ended up getting married. On the Oprah Winfrey Show, Patricia said, "I was in love with him, and I just felt it was the right thing to do. They didn't like us because we were living as a black and white couple, and that just wasn't done." Mariah's father was a disciplinarian, and naturally he was drawn to the military. He believed fighting for his country would earn him the respect he desired, especially as a black man in America during those times. But he soon learned that being in the military wouldn't protect him from being a target. While on the base, a white woman said she was assaulted by a black man. With no evidence other than his skin colour, he was placed in the military jail. They eventually released him, claiming they had caught the culprit. Mariah said he was released with no support, no counselling, and no apology. Mariah described how her mother, along with the kids, would have to walk into the house first to ensure their safety. Mariah said her parents worked hard so the family could live in a better neighbourhood. "We were not a conventional family. Was it better? To live in a place where my white mother would often walk alone through the front door first, ahead of my black father with her mixed kids for their safety. What does that do to the psyche of a man who's supposed to be the head of the household? How can such a man keep his family safe? And what does such an indignity signal to his black son?" Mariah's father was a good cook, unlike her mother. He was a specialist in Italian food. Her parents' marriage ended when she was 3, and her sister went to live with him. Her brother soon moved away too. After this, Mariah would spend Sundays with her father, and he would always cook a big meal for the family. In the book, The Meaning of Mariah Carey, Mariah said that her brother dealt with many issues growing up. According to the book, he had to deal with racial bullying from both the white kids and the black kids. And he was born with a disability. Some reports say it was cerebral palsy. However, in subsequent interviews, he said he overcame his physical challenges through diet and exercise. According to Mariah, her brother grew up extremely angry and was involved in a couple of violent incidents involving his parents. Both times, the police were called. During one of those incidents, his mother ended up getting knocked out during a fight over whether he could borrow her car. At just 3 at the time, Mariah had to call for help, thinking her mother was dead. Mariah said her siblings were both smart and got good grades in school, but unfortunately they ended up taking quite destructive paths. In particular, Alison. Alison was born 2 years after her parents married. With darker hair and skin than her sister, she may have faced and seen more racism. For example, her own grandmother refused to allow her and her brother to come to family gatherings, and especially not their father, but she would allow Mariah to come because, quote, she had lighter skin and blondish hair. As her parents separated when she was only 3, Mariah said she never spent any significant time as part of a whole interracial family. Most of her experience was with one parent at a time, going back and forth between 2 households. The Careys married before the Supreme Court ruling of Loving v. Virginia, which struck down the law banning interracial marriage. They were even together before the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed discrimination based on race, colour, sex, and national origin. It's believed that Mariah's parents eventually divorced due to societal pressure. But also, Alfred was probably changed forever after his experiences in the military and being in a position where even the law didn't initially afford him the same rights as his wife. Mariah acknowledged that her siblings saw much more than she did in terms of racism and being in an interracial family. She said, Morgan and Alison were beautiful children and were very close when they were young. Alison had skin like creamy butterscotch pudding, with the head of thick, deep dark curls and eyes to match. She was extremely intelligent and curious, and she loved to learn. I was told she brought home good grades, got into good schools, and loved music too. But she lived firsthand the discomfort and animosity directed at her and her offbeat black and white family. She saw their neighbours throw raw meat studded with broken glass to their dogs, and their family car blown up. She saw things inside the family too, things a child should never see, and I will never know. I do know that what she experienced damaged and derailed her girlhood. Mariah said both of her siblings resented her and perceived her to be the golden child, which they hated her for. After their parents divorced, she lived with their white mother and was considered white passing, with her blondish hair and fairer skin tone, for which they resented her greatly.
My parents made me say I am an interracial child, okay, which is going to alienate you right there. My mother said, nothing like that will ever happen to Mariah. I won't let it happen. And she moved, and Mariah became Italian and Irish.
Morgan and Alison are significantly older than Mariah. Morgan is 10 years her senior, and Alison is 8 years older than her. When their parents divorced in 1973, her brother was 13 and Alison was 10. And it seems till this day, the relationship between the siblings is still strained, especially after Mariah released her memoirs. So Morgan had a huge afro when he was a kid. He definitely stood out in his predominantly white neighborhood and school. Like Alison, Morgan witnessed the racism, attacks, and discrimination his parents had to endure, and he suffered too, getting bullied and attacked due to his race. In the 80s, Morgan did some modeling for an Italian modeling agency, and he is really into fitness. He's a vegan too. After his dad brought home a dead animal from a hunting trip, Morgan vowed to never eat meat again. Before Mariah even came on the scene, Morgan was a successful fitness trainer in LA and had been featured in various men's fitness magazines. He's now 62 and still in incredible shape. One thing he and Mariah eventually had in common was music. Morgan entered the music industry himself, behind the scenes as a music producer. Michael Jackson had a music label called MJJ Music, which was a subsidiary of Sony. The label was distributed by Epic Records, founded in 1993. One of their artists was Quo, an Australian-American hip-hop duo. They worked with Teddy Riley, Redman, and Morgan produced a couple of their songs. He also worked with other artists such as Little Ratchet and Korean reggae artist Skull. Morgan currently lives in Italy and founded the company Victorious Green, which deals with agricultural produce and various products. He's very much into a holistic lifestyle, sustainability, and organic gardening. On the 3rd of March 2021, it was reported that Morgan sued Mariah over the claims she made in her book, and basically portraying him as a violent kid who attacked his own mother and had altercations with their father. According to court documents obtained by TMZ, the following excerpts were cited. Number 1, she said, "It took 12 cops to pull my brother and my father apart. The big bodies of men, all entangled like a swirling hurricane, crashed loudly into the living room. I was a little girl with very few memories of a big brother who protected me. More often, I felt I had to protect myself from him, and sometimes I would find myself protecting my mother from him too." Morgan denied that he ever had physical altercations with his father when Mariah was a child, and that there's no way 12 cops would respond to a domestic dispute. Mariah also wrote, "Suddenly, there was a loud, sharp noise. Like an actual gunshot, my brother had pushed my mother with such force that her body slammed into the wall, making a loud cracking sound. Morgan said this is also completely false and that Mariah contradicts herself later on in the book when she claimed that her mother said, "Morgan is the only one I love." Shortly before Morgan's case against Mariah, his sister Alison also sued Mariah for defamation, seeking $1.25 million. Alison grew up with her siblings in Long Island. Aged 11, after her parents separated, she went to live with her father. Her father was a strict disciplinarian. Mariah once recalled how he gave her one Reese cracker, and it was basically one and done. Alison clashed with both parents and basically left home at 16. At 15, she ended up pregnant, and it was strongly suggested that she married the father. The father of her baby was a military man. According to the book, not only did Alison get married and become a new mother, she also moved to the Philippines, where her husband was stationed, and she had to drop out of high school. Mariah promised herself that that was not going to be her. "I vowed I was not going to be promiscuous, ever. The promise to live a different life led me to become a very prudish person. I knew then, suddenly finding myself an auntie before I was 8 years old, that Alison's path was not going to be my life." Alison moved away for several years. When she returned, she was a single mother and was unable to find a job. She turned to the streets to make money. Mariah wrote about how she had changed so much. She had no idea what had happened to her while she was away. "I will never understand what happened to her in the Philippines. But I do know, when she left my father's house, the remainder of her fragile childhood was left behind." After a few years in the Philippines, Alison returned to Long Island. "I was about 12 years old, and she was 20. Whatever happened to her over there, or on Long Island, or in a back room somewhere, had taken its toll on her. That super smart, beautiful girl with the dark curls, who was my big sister, had hardened into a strange kind of absence. Something, or many things, must have happened to her to lead her to barter her body for money and drugs, as she went on to do for years. So what claims in the book did Alison seek damages for? Well, the first claim is that Alison allegedly took a 12-year-old Mariah to some old man's house, a man who would sometimes fill up her mother's fridge with food. So for some reason, her mother let her guard down in regards to him. Mariah alleged that Alison gave her Valium and she passed out for a little while. Even after this incident, Mariah still looked up to Alison. She took her to get her hair done. She took her to get her first bra and her eyebrows waxed. But no matter how hard they tried to be normal sisters, Alison kept going back to a dark place, and she seemed intent on taking Mariah with her. Mariah also claimed that her sister once offered her cocaine. She believes there's no telling where she would have been today if she had taken such a highly addictive and dangerous substance. Mariah referred to the incident as a setup. Another claim made involved Alison's boyfriend named John, who Mariah also referred to as her pimp. John would always carry a gun, and Alison once allegedly left Mariah alone in a car with him, at which point he began to behave very inappropriately with her, but thankfully a random man pulled up beside them and could see something wasn't right. John drove off and returned Mariah home. Mariah said she still remembers the face of the man who saved her till this day. "I don't know why my sister drugged me. I don't know why my mother let me go with her and this man. Perhaps they both wanted me out of their hair for the evening, but my life was in jeopardy in her hands." And after that, she stopped hanging out with her sister. Alison divorced her first husband in 1980 and remarried in 1985. She had her second son in 1987. In 1988, she tested positive for HIV and divorced the following year. In 1990, Mariah's debut solo album was released, and the awards rolled in. She finally managed to impress her father, who didn't think music was a real job, and he pointed out that she didn't quite have the same number of awards as Quincy Jones. In 1994, Mariah's mother, Patricia, came to collect Alison's son Michael to spend the weekend, but she ended up taking him for good. She didn't like the conditions he was living in, and she believes it was due to Alison's history of illegal drug use. A huge custody battle ensued, with Mariah saying, "This is a horrible and extremely upsetting situation that will hopefully be resolved as soon as possible for the sake of the child."
I'm gonna send a message to my son. Michael, Mommy loves you very, very much. I'm doing everything in my power to get you back.
It's no secret that Mariah has looked out for Alison's children over the years, especially the firstborn son, Sean. She set up a trust fund for both boys and paid for Sean to go to law school. He is now a Harvard Law School graduate and the vice president for business and legal affairs for Major League Baseball. Who knows if he would have been where he is today if it wasn't for Mariah. He and Mariah are very close, and he is part of her inner circle. The custody battle over Michael caused a major rift between Mariah and Alison and their mother. Patricia was granted temporary custody before the 1995 trial. It's reported that Alison failed to show up to one of the hearings, blaming it on sickness. Mariah reportedly paid for her to go to rehab several times, and Patricia ended up gaining full custody. Alison disputed all of the allegations made in the book, including the one where Mariah claimed that Alison threw a hot cup of tea over her. Mariah described how it went all over her back, and her clothes had to be cut off as the shirt she was wearing fused to her skin, and she ended up with third-degree burns. The court papers stated, Mariah also callously dismisses Alison as her ex-sister, but instead of saying no more about her, Mariah used her book to humiliate and embarrass the plaintiff as stories about the memoir appeared in the newspapers around the world, on TV and across the internet, most of them with headlines repeating the defendant's allegations, all of them published without giving Alison any opportunity to respond. And Alison revealed that she suffers from PTSD, anxiety and depression as a result of childhood trauma and has been in therapy. She alleged that Mariah used her status as a public figure to attack her penniless sister for sensational headlines, boosting publicity for the book. 5 years earlier, in 2016, Mariah's brother called her a monster as it was reported that a quote-unquote dying Alison begged her for financial help to receive medical treatment.
Mariah, I love you and I desperately need your help. Please don't abandon me like this.
Alison was in a difficult situation, and many thought it was heartless of Mariah, who is worth almost $400 million, to not help her sister. However, many disagreed, especially now after the book was published 5 years later. But nevertheless, Mariah did get a lot of backlash. Alison, who was 53 at the time, claimed to have not heard from her sister for years. Alison wrote an open letter to Mariah that was published in Star magazine, saying the following: "It's hard not having you in my life. You're irreplaceable, not because you're Mariah Carey, but because you're my baby sister, the only one I'll even have. Yes, I could use your help. Outside of making a better life for my children, I'm not in this for what I can get. And I would be one of the few people that you could count on to tell you the truth, which is what I've always done for you. You need someone you could trust. Of course I love you. I've always loved you. I just wish that we could let the past be the past and start over from here. I've done things that are wrong, but let me show you who I am today, who I can be for you. Mariah, as a sister. Love, Dandelion." Alison went on to have 2 more children. At the time, her son was 15 and her daughter was 13. She claimed that Mariah cut ties with them too, which hurt them and confused them. In Alison's open letter, she claimed that it wasn't just about money. Morgan did an interview with iHeartRadio, and he claimed that Mariah basically abandoned Alison. Mariah doesn't care about anyone but herself. I would hope Mariah could find it in her heart to forgive Alison her transgressions and step up. Create a trust. Let's make sure Alison's needs are met. Morgan claimed that they were once very close, and that Alison herself wanted to be a singer like her sister. However, she fell into a dark path and got hooked on drugs.
When you look at me, I'm everything and more than I had dreamed I'd be. My spirit feels a promise I won't be alone.
Then he said, there wouldn't be a Mariah Carey today if it hadn't been for me. The interviewer pointed out a statement from Mariah's publicists, which said, through the years, Mariah has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars supporting Alison and her children. Morgan's reply was, I will always be puzzled why Alison, a heroin addict, has always been given large sums of money from Mariah her whole life. You can't put large sums of cash into the hands of a drug addict. And lastly, Mariah explained where she and her siblings are today in the book, saying, through the years, both my sister and brother have put me on the chopping block, sold lies to any gossip rag or trashy website that would buy or listen. They have attacked me for decades. But when I was 12 years old, my sister drugged me with Valium, offered me a pinky nail full of cocaine, inflicted me with third-degree burns, and tried to sell me out to a pimp. A local newspaper in Long Island reported that Alison receives Social Security allowances for various health conditions in the amount of $684 a month, a huge contrast to the life that her sister leads. She's no doubt been through so much, but I don't think it's Mariah who can save her, no matter how much money she has.
I'm Alison Carey. Unfortunately, I'm living without teeth. I haven't been able to replace them. I wish I could replace them. But I just don't have the money. So this is where I stand. It's almost impossible to get things done without teeth. That's all I really have to say.
Do you think it's hard for non-famous siblings to deal with the fame of their sister or brother and the disproportionate levels of wealth? Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts below, you know I read the comments. Like and subscribe for weekly videos, and don't forget to click the bell for more.